2009 marks 50 years since the democratic reform in Tibet. In accordance with the decision by the Tibetan People's Congress, March the 28th will be observed as Serfs' Emancipation Day, when over 1 million Tibetan serfs were given their freedom. In recent years, the authorities in the US have established in the state of Virginia the first museum recording the country's history of slavery. The French government has declared May the 10th as the day for remembering the abolition of slavery. In the English city of Liverpool, which was a major port used by slave traders, activities were held in 2007 to mark the 200th anniversary of the abolition of the slave trade. The era of slavery was one of the darkest periods in human history. People were deprived of their basic human rights, natural human decency was destroyed, and human culture and thought were shackled. The origins of the infamous slave trade can be traced back to the 15th century and the European colonists' overseas explorations. Thousands upon thousands of black people were kidnapped from Africa and sold in foreign countries, an action that has marked so-called Western civilization with the indelible stain of disgrace. For several centuries previously, a different system known as serfdom had been practiced on the European continent. It came into existence when, following the fall of the Roman Empire and the collapse of its system of slavery, vast areas of land were acquired by religious orders and secular nobles. The farmers who lost their land had only one choice if they were to survive: to accept being reduced to the status of property owned by the feudal landlords. They were forced to plow the fields belonging to the landlords. In return, they were subjected to oppression and exploitation. The system of feudal serfdom was also practiced in Tibet in China. There, however, it survived for much longer than it did in Europe. At the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, Western explorers and colonists in large numbers began crossing the snow-capped mountains and reaching Lhasa. Among them was a Briton named Charles Bell. Bell kept a diary, and in it he wrote that what he saw in Tibet gave him the feelings of returning to the Middle Ages. Tibet was still a feudal society where fire and boiling oil were common means of punishment, and sorcery was commonly practiced. The nobles and lamas had enormous power over their serfs, who themselves had almost nothing. In short, Bell said everything he saw there reminded him of the brutality and savagery of Europe in the Middle Ages. During the Middle Ages in Europe, a strict relationship of ownership existed between the landlords and the serfs. The king, the nobles, and the bishops formed the ruling feudal class. They forced the serfs to work in their fields and in return allotted them a small plot of land to till for themselves. However, the purpose of giving the serfs land was not to allow them the chance to lead a decent life. It was in fact to ensure that the serfs were physically strong enough to work for their owners.
欧洲人在评价这个欧洲农奴制的时候，用这样话叫 "only his belly"， 这意思就是什么是农奴他自己的呢？只有他的肚子是他自己的，就是他的财产只有他的胃。
A similar expression was used far off in the East. In Tibet, it was said that the only thing a serf could take with him was his own shadow. All he left behind him was his own footprints. Like their counterparts in Europe, Tibet's landlords obtained their land in the form of feudal grounds. From the 14th century onwards, most of Tibet's territory, the pasture, forests, mountains and rivers, as well as the livestock, was owned by government officials, nobles and senior lamas. They were the three pillars of rule in Tibet, despite accounting for just 5% of the population. As for the remaining 95% of the population, they were serfs. There was little difference among the serfs in terms of their economic situation and degree of freedom. As the Tibetan folk song says, on the mountain there are beasts, not one of them with an owner. But at the mountain's foot there are serfs. not one of them without an owner.